Hey, seventh graders, it's me, Mr. Allard, with another one of your flip lessons. Today we're going to be talking about our the Jackson presidency, the presidency of Andrew Jackson, two-term president, 1828 through 1836. Oh, hold on, we got a visitor that wants to come in. Hey, look who it is! Somebody wanted to make their flip lesson debut. Oh, she doesn't really want it. She doesn't like this at all. This is Chloe. She's going to be in here while we talk about. Oh. She's going to be in here while we talk about the Andrew Jackson presidency. Like I said, two-term president. Um, very, very varied opinions on Andrew Jackson. Some people love him. Some people hate him. He's definitely somebody. Let me let the cat out. She's going crazy over here at the door. But you'll be the judge of that by the end of kind of our couple days talking about Andrew Jackson. All right, here we go. Let me get out of here. So we talked about the election of 1824, right, and the corrupt bargain. And after that, Andrew Jackson kind of goes on a campaign. In his campaign, he's trying to do basically spread the word about the corrupt bargain, but he's also kind of trying to get people to focus on increasing participation in politics. And you can see the numbers here from 1824 to 1828 are astronomical in difference. And so Jackson, obviously, if we look at the map, beats Quincy Adams in 1828. He does it by basically sweeping the South and the Western states. You can see we're adding more states to the Union. And the big thing that we can see from this, and this is a big plus of what we call the Jacksonian Democracy, because he's a Democrat at this point. We have the Democrats against the Republicans. Again, don't get it twisted with the Democratic and Republicans today, or the Democratic Republicans we've already talked about. Very, very different political party viewpoints. The Jacksonian Democrats are going to appeal to the people, and Jackson appeals to the common man. But one of the things that happened, and you can see how big of a deal this created in the United States, is many states got rid of the property right requirement. Remember, we talked about in order to vote in many of the states, you had to be white, you had to be a man, you had to be over the age of 21, you had to own property, and in some states you had to be a member of a particular religious group. Well, many states got away from that, and in the election of 1824, Jackson had the most votes. Now, he was going against 4 people, but he only had 153,000 total popular votes. He has 647,000 votes here. Even if you add up the total from 1824, that doesn't even come close to coming to Jackson's total. And we can see that Adams had another 500,000 votes. The most people voted in the election of 1828 than ever before, and it was because of dropping that property requirement. But Jackson is thrust into office, overwhelming win. He also has an overwhelming win in 1832. Jackson is extremely popular with the people. They see him as a man of the people. They see him as one of their own. He's a war hero. He's a lawyer. He's a farmer. He's a businessman from Tennessee, and he's hugely popular. Let me find it. There's a good spot there. So right off the bank, Jackson has an issue with the tariff of 1828. Well, Jackson doesn't really have the issue. A tariff, again, is a tax on goods that are imported from a country. All right, so these are goods coming from England, France, Spain, Germany, places like that. The tariff of 1828 was particularly on one good, and that was on cotton cloth coming back from England. The tariff is going to hurt Southerners more than it's going to hurt Northerners, because Southerners are importing most of their goods. They're farming cotton, they're farming cash crops, tobacco, and stuff like that. They're trading it with other countries, and they're bringing back goods from other countries. It's going to help Northern business. They couldn't really compete with England's mills. England's mills were producing more. They were producing it more cheaply, and the North could not compete with that. So to make things even, the government created a bunch of tariffs to try to make American goods cheaper than their British rivals. South Carolina, however, took a very unique position. They threatened to leave the Union. They felt the states could nullify or not follow a law if they thought that law was unconstitutional. South Carolina deemed the Tariff of 1828 unconstitutional and felt that the states themselves could go against it. Jackson himself probably was not a fan of the tariff. He was a farmer. He was against kind of big business interests, so to speak. However, he as his job as the enforcer took that very seriously and basically created what was called the Force Bill to force South Carolina and other states to do this. Basically, what the Force Bill said is it gave him the right to send troops into these states to make sure they were paying their tariff. In 1828, we were pretty close to starting a civil war, and remember that the state that was upset in 1828 was South Carolina. That's going to come up in a little bit. But the Tariff of 1832 is passed, and that's going to cheapen the tax, cheapen the tariff to end the issue. Trail of Tears. This is going to be something we're going to talk a little bit more in depth probably on Thursday. Jackson in Congress, one of the first things that he does is he's going to pass the Indian Removal Act in 1830 to force the Cherokee tribe and other tribes in the Southeast off of their land. The Cherokees at this point are much, much more American than they are Native American. They dress like Americans. They live in towns. They live in houses. They have their own businesses. They have their own lawyers. They have their own alphabet and newspapers and things like that. They've really become a word Americanized. So they, instead of going to war over this issue, they go to war in court and they sue the government and they actually win in the Supreme Court. Andrew Jackson very famously tells the Supreme Court, you ruled against us. All right, how about you go enforce it? The Supreme Court can't really enforce what it does. That's up for Andrew Jackson. Andrew Jackson basically gives a time and a place, and you can see the different dates. They're forcing and making the Native Americans move off of this land. And all in all, 5 tribes move from the southwest. Some other tribes move from the north in Illinois and Indiana, and they're packed into what is present-day Oklahoma and Kansas onto Native American reservations. The force, what will become the Trail of Tears is famously the Cherokee movement. That has happened in the winter. Over 25% of the Cherokees are going to die during this time period. It's a 1,200-mile walk. We know now it is one of the coldest and harshest winter months. The Cherokee were not allowed to gather belongings or anything like that on their way out. So this is going to be a very problematic time. And if 25% doesn't seem like a lot, if you have 4 people in your family, one person isn't making it. The people that were most likely not going to make it are going to be the elderly, and they're going to be the very young. Compound with that issue is you're not going to stop to kind of have a ceremony if a family members of yours dies, and you're going to be forced on a reservation probably hundreds of miles away from where your loved one is laid to rest with no ability to see them and no ability to take care of them. It became known as the Trail of Tears, one of the darkest times of not only Jackson's presidency, but probably American history, the forced removal of Native Americans from their tribes. The biggest reason why they were forced to move, we'll see this in our next unit when we overlay a map of where the biggest cotton growing areas were. It's pretty much over Cherokee Creek, Choctaw, and Chickasaw land. They wanted those Native Americans off the land so they could expand cotton plantations. The last big battle of Jackson's kind of career is going to be the Bank of the United States. Jackson had a long-standing hatred of the bank. They kind of did him dirty in his own life. He came pretty close to becoming bankrupt because he couldn't get credit to run his business early in his after he stopped being in the Army and created his own business. Much like the Democratic Republicans when the First National Bank was formed, they felt banks only helped big business and hurt farmers. We can kind of look at those examples from Shays Rebellion, from the Whiskey Rebellion, as issues where farmers were kind of hurt economically by a bank. It was very hard for them to get credit to buy goods and things like that. What happens is the national bank had to be kind of renewed every few years. They did so through a bill that passed Congress, and they actually tried to do this early. The actual bank did not expire until 1836, but they pledged to do it in around 1830, 1832, because they wanted to do it during an election year because they felt Jackson would not veto the bill. He would let it pass because he would be worried about losing states that were banking was important, like Pennsylvania and things like that. Jackson really didn't care. As we talked about, most of his support was in the West and in the South, and he knew those folks weren't going to vote against him if he vetoed this bank bill. He vetoes the bill to extend the national bank. As I just said, the national bank wasn't up for expiration, so it actually lasted a few more years, but the bank expired in 1836. One of the other reasons why Jackson did this is something we're going to get into kind of on Thursday about his how he ran his government. He took government money out of the national bank and he put it in banks owned by his supporters. He was very big on giving jobs and giving things back to the people who supported him, and many people thought that led to corruption during his presidency. Jackson, again, was president until 1836, and the problems of the bank never really surfaced during his presidency. But in 1837, a major economic collapse, almost like a Great Depression type era, happened due to the lack of a national bank to kind of take care of us economically. Well, those are some big events of Jackson's presidency. We also had an appearance of Chloe. But that's it for today. If you have any questions or anything like that, we are going to go a little bit more in depth on a couple of issues, particularly the Trail of Tears and how Jackson kind of ran his government. We'll go over those for the next couple of days, which might mean we might have to push back the quiz and the interactive notebook check, but that's no big deal. If you have any questions, as always, hit me up on Schoology. If it's a direct message to me, send me a message or post something on the update board. I've seen a couple more folks doing that, which is awesome. Till then, see you, 7th graders. Add it out.